welcome to Crosspoint. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Vince, and I'm so excited you're tuning in with us today for week 2 of the 2-week series, The Day We Told the Truth. We're pulling the curtains back again this weekend, so if this is your first time with us, we're glad you're here. We want you to know we built this place for people who like their church a little less churchy, for people who may have given up on church, but haven't given up on God. If that's you, we're especially grateful you decided to be with us today. Now, we'd love to connect with you and hear from you, and the best way to do that is to text the word connection to the number on your screen, or fill out the form next to the stream with your name and contact information. And be sure to share your email and mailing address, and we'll drop you something in the mail this week, simply as a way of saying thank you for joining us today. And for those of you who've been with us before, hey, welcome back. We always love to hear from you on the connection card as well. Okay, while you're working on that, here are this week's top 3 things you need to know. Number 1, the all-church journey Live Free begins next weekend. And if this is your first time, you're not going to want to miss this, as these next 6 weeks are going to be some of the most creative, immersive experiences we do all year. And this year's journey is about your freedom. That's right, your freedom. And let's talk about freedom for a moment. Living in freedom is about more than choosing your career or voting for the politician of your choice. It's more than simply making your own decisions, staying out of jail, or even being saved. Total freedom means you're living fearlessly, passionately, and joyfully, regardless of your circumstances, not because of them. Now, one of the best parts of the journey is we've got some free stuff for you. One being this Live Free Journey Field Guide. The Field Guide is an important tool for some of the individual processes we'll do each week, and we'd love to send one in the mail to you. If you'd like to get one of these sweet field guides filled with inventories, stories of freedom, pithy quips and quotes, and a week-by-week guide to some of the things we'll be exploring, let us know on your connection card and include your mailing address, and this will be hitting your mailbox here this week. Number 2, a huge part of the Live Free journey is a small group experience. You're going to hear more on this in a bit. So the main thing we want you to know right now is that the Live Free journey groups are open for registration, and you can scan the QR code on the screen to take a look. There's groups for women, for men, open groups for anyone regardless of gender, as well as in-person and online groups. So check those out. More on that. Number 3, if you're in the greater Indianapolis area and you have a 7th through 12th grade student, we'd love to see them at CSM, Crosspoint Student Ministries, which happens every Sunday evening from 6 to 7:30 right here on the Crosspoint campus. This week, we'll be continuing to help students discover that you don't have to check your brain at the door to have the faith in Jesus. But embracing your intellect might be just one of the best ways to expand your faith. It's a fun conversation called I Wonder, the mystery of loving God with your mind. So students, join us this weekend at CSM, where there's tons of opportunities to make lasting friendships and an experience with teaching and breakout groups, specifically designed for you to explore God. Check out the QR code for more information on CSM. All right, we've got a great service planned for you today. We're getting real again and doing take 2 on our unfiltered look at some things that take us to newer and deeper places. It's part 2 of The Day We Told the Truth. And so, as you watch and listen, if things feel a little bit different here at Crosspoint than perhaps other church experiences, just know that's by design. So let's head to the venue, and before we hear from Curt, here's a song from the Crosspoint House Band that reminds us that God's dream for us is more important than just sitting in rows, but being in circles. Circles with others headed in the same direction. Here's Imagine Dragons, Follow You.
You know I got your number all night. I'm always on your team, I got your back, alright. Taking those losses if it treats you right. I wanna put you into the spotlight. If the world would only know what you've been holding back. Heart attacks every night, oh you know it's not right. I will follow you way down, wherever you may go. I'll follow you way down to your deepest soul. I'll always be around, wherever I take you. You know I follow you, call you up, you've been crying all night. You're only disappointed in yourself, alright. Taking those losses if it treats you right. I wanna take you into the sunlight. The world would only know what you've been holding back. Heart attacks every night, oh you know it's not right. I will follow you way down. life end in a tight glove. I wish that I could fix it for you. But instead I'll be right here coming through. Wherever you may go, I'll follow you way down to your deepest flow. I'll always be around wherever I take you. You know I'll follow you. La 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 la. You know I'll follow you. La 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 la. Wherever I take you, you know I'll follow you.
Yeah, let's give it up for this band. I tell you what, some great music. And I don't know, that song really captures what we're about here at Crosspoint. You know, I'll follow you wherever you may go. I mean, think about having people like that in your life that through the ups and downs and regardless of how low you go, man, you got somebody in your circle. Well, we're going to talk about this weekend. It's great to have you join us. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time, we certainly hope it's the first of many times. And let's make some noise for those tuning online with us this weekend. Man, it's so good to have you guys at Crosspoint Online, YouTube Online, all across our state, our nation, even our world. How cool is that? Well, man, we are excited for kind of wrapping this series up, part 2 of the day we told the truth. As we get started in doing that, let me just pray for us. Heavenly Father, first of all, thank you for the chance to just be here. We're here, a lot of places we could be right now, and yet we're running after something. We're looking for something. We're looking for you. We want more of you in our lives. That's why we're here, and we're all at different places in that, but we just pray that as a result of our time, we would experience the transcendent in some unique way. And God, I just pray that this time would be helpful, that it'd be beneficial, and Father, I just pray most importantly that my words are in alignment with your heart. And I pray these things according to your character, Jesus. Amen. Well, today we're going to continue this unfiltered talk on just, kind of who we're for and what we're about here at Crosspoint. Last week we talked about purpose and how purpose really is like the opposite of gravity. Gravity pulls things in, purpose pushes things out. Purpose is expansive. It really requires you to get outside yourself, to be about things that are bigger than yourself. And we even kind of use this definition where we said, purpose is where an organization's distinctive characteristics and gifts intersect with the needs of the world. And I love that definition because it gives us like a daily event around the idea of purpose. It's not something we put on a website or on a wall. It's something that we actually do. It gives us direction, and those directions actually lead us to certain places. In fact, last weekend, if you were with us, if not, we said our purpose here at Crosspoint is very simple. We're here to help people find their way to God. And just a real quick recap on that, we kind of broke that phrase down into 3 sections. First of all, we said we're just simply here to help people. And what does it mean to help people? It means to be for people. It means to, whatever's good for people, like generally is like good for people. And so we're for adult people and little people and student people and married people and divorced people and, people who are dating. We're for the LGBT community people. We're for, the marginalized community people. We're for people who just are underserved in our community. We're just here. We feel like the church is a place that should be available for everyone. And that kind of leads us to the next part. We're here to help people find their way. And we talked about how, all of us are on a journey. I mean, this indicates you and I are on a journey. And so here at Crosspoint, we're here to help. That's really the role that we play, and we recently put something together to even more clearly kind of clarify how we kind of come alongside and help you in your journey. And you can scan the QR code right here. This is kind of like a spiritual roadmap, if you will. All of us are in one of 4 phases, and you can download this if you scan that QR code. It's at the bottom of your screen online. If you didn't get it last weekend, check this out. We're either in a seeker phase, and there's certain things that will help us move to experience God more. Whether you've taken the step to receive Jesus, you've entered the receiving phase. Some of us are in the following phase. Some of us are at this sacrificial life phase. We're all at different places, but there's things that we can do that actually move us to the next phase, that grow our faith. Now, these aren't spiritual checklists. It's not, that's religion. But there are things that we actually can engage in that move us, and that's a big part of what we want to be about here at Crosspoint. And then last, we're here to help people find their way to God. And so ultimately, our whole existence is really to do whatever it takes. I mean, there's really not much that's off limits to us, to just simply help people find their way, to see that there's a Heavenly Father who loves you, who runs after you, who wants to know you and invite you into what he's doing in the world to simply follow him. And so that kind of brings us to part 2 this weekend. Who's ready? You guys ready to get involved in part 2 here? All right, here we go. Before we do that, quick confession. How many of you have ever had a used piece of exercise machinery in your house that you hung some clothes on? Like you made it into a clothes rack like this right here. Yeah, like, right? And those of you that didn't, perhaps you just didn't have your treadmill, for instance, in a place where you hang your clothes. How about this question? How many of you have ever sold a piece of exercise equipment that was barely used? I mean, you bought it, had great intentions, and then you sold it, and like maybe it had kids' fingerprints on it from like them crawling all over it, a few cobwebs from sitting in the corner, but not much use on it. How many of us? Just out of curiosity. A few of us, a bunch of liars out there. You know, why did you buy that piece of equipment? Why did you purchase it in the first place? Well, you bought it because you're a believer, right? Because you believe in fitness. You believe in, exercise. You believe in cardio. We all probably believe in that. And the reason it sits in our homes and begins to collect, clothing on it is because it's not because we don't believe. It's because we actually just don't use it. And kind of the reason that when it comes to exercise equipment, most people don't act on what they believe is because it takes some work. And all of this, we understand this, certainly when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to our health, but, believing when it comes to faith is really no different. I mean, it's the doing, it's the active part that makes the difference. And so, here's another even kind of crazier idea when we think about exercise. How many of you ever exercised and you had a bad attitude while you did it? Like, you're like, I do not want to be out here today. I hate this. This isn't working. Anybody ever had a bad attitude while you've exercised? You're like, this isn't going anywhere. It's not doing anything. And yet, guess what? It actually did. Because whatever you believed about that didn't really matter. It was actually the fact that you did it. And this is true in so much of our life. I mean, there's so many realms of our life. We're going to dig into one specifically today. One more thing about exercise. Isn't it true that, those of us that actually exercise, or maybe you used to exercise, or maybe your gym closed, and you're like, I got to find another gym, so I've been exercising. But doesn't it make all the difference having a partner? Like when you have a partner, doesn't that just like change everything? I mean, I know for me, I have a running routine I do every week, and about this time of year, it gets really difficult. I mean, the sun is coming up later, it's cold in the morning, and some days my muscles are screaming, they're like, Curt, do not go on a run. And, it's just much easier to talk myself out of it if I don't have anybody waiting on me. And one of the beautiful parts about this time of the year is I have a daughter who runs on the cross-country team, and she's about ready to end her season. So before long, she's going to be training at home with me instead of at school. And so every morning, multiple times a week, we will run together, and that will pull me out when I feel like I don't want to do this. Because, accountability when it comes to exercising, really with anything in life, like it actually counts, like it works. And here's one of the things I want us to kind of think about, and this might be a bit scandalous to you. Perhaps you've never heard a pastor say something like this. You might even push back on it a bit. But, these two dynamics right here, this believing, really doesn't make all that much of a difference. I mean, it's a starting point. All right? And so we can even come into a space like this, which is really important. But if all we do is believe and we sit here in the seats or we tune in online, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not really going to do much for you. All right, we've said since day one at Crosspoint, 65 minutes in an auditorium, I think God had way more in mind for our spiritual lives than just that. And I think he had way more than just sitting in here and go, oh man, that's a really good thought. I probably ought to implement that. And then we walk out and we go on with our life. All right, because that just doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, it's a good starting point. But it's what we do that makes the difference. And accountability, it actually really matters. And so let's just think about believing for a moment. All right, I mean, every Christian, if you are a Christian or if you know of people who are Christians or as you think about becoming a Christian, every Christian believes, right? I mean, that's kind of why sometimes we refer to Christians as believers, because we believe. We have certain things we assent to. So believers believe, but not all believers actually act on what they believe, right? I mean, we say, well, Jesus taught this, and I believe that, or I believe Jesus is who he says he is. But we don't actually forgive the way Jesus, calls us to forgive. We don't actually, love others and love our enemies the way that Jesus, calls us to do this. Many of us have never been water baptized, even though Jesus is, super clear on, this is something that he wants us to follow him in. I mean, most believers don't really give generously with their finances the way Jesus calls us to give generous. I may go on and on and on. He just emphasizes, that it's not believing that matters. It's actually what we do with what we believe. And if you've been around Crosspoint for any length of time, if you've been here for years, or perhaps you've just walked in over the last few weeks, since the very beginning, we've never really been content just asking people to raise their hand. Say, hey, do you believe, and raise my hand. Yeah, I believe. I mean, we don't want somebody walking out going, whew, man, look at all the progress I made. Whew, I decided to believe tonight. I mean, it's a starting point. That's a starting point. But from the very beginning, we said, okay, it's not just, assenting in my head to something. It's actually, we believe Jesus calls us to follow. This is why we have next steps every weekend. Sometimes people are like, what's up with all the next steps? Everything we do is a next step. Well, we just think that, faith is like one day after another, one foot in front of the other, continuing to grow and follow. And you've probably heard us said many times if you've been around here, and you'll hear it many more times, we really do believe that when you follow Jesus, I mean, maybe not right away, but you will discover your life is so much better. And you will also just begin to discover, and again, it may not happen like boom, overnight. We want the instant impact, but as you continue to follow, you're going to find you are so much better at life, at relationships, at everything that matters in life. So today we're going to kind of pull back the curtain for week number 2, and I want us to discover something that, again, if you've been around here for a while, you've probably heard this. If you're newer, perhaps you haven't. But I just want all cards on the table, and that is that if you want to have a growing, vibrant relationship with Jesus, I mean, you just want to have that kind of faith that lasts through difficult things, there's really one thing that makes a significant difference. There's one catalyst that when you build this in, I'm telling you, it really begins to take you to new experiences. And that is this right here. You have to find your tribe. You have to find your tribe. You have to find your people. That's why you hear us say all the time, you got to get out of rows and into circles. All right? Because you can't follow Jesus in isolation. You can't just come in here and sit and listen and go, oh man, this is awesome, I'm going to put this into practice, because you need people around you to help you do that. And perhaps this is one of the biggest areas the pandemic really kind of created a lot of collateral damage in our world, especially with people of faith, is that, we kind of had to shut stuff down and we couldn't come into this space for a while. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do I do? And we discovered for some of us, in fact, it became a crystal clear moment for us here at Crosspoint. We were like, there are some people that are doing so well during that pandemic season, like that you couldn't come to in-person services, but like you had the tools and you had to cultivate your faith and you had people around you and you're like, man, not that the season's easy, but like my faith is really getting me through. And then we had other people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I mean, if I can't walk into a space, I'm lost. I don't know what to do, because I think Jesus had way more in mind than just what happens in this space. And so those that had a tribe, we just observed, oh my gosh, like they really did cultivate and kind of self-feed and continue to, propel their faith forward. And those who didn't have a tribe, man, they just ended up kind of deteriorating when it came to faith. And the Apostle Paul, he kind of gives us some insight as to why. And we love the Apostle Paul around here. In fact, he kind of shows up on the pages of history hating Christians. So if you're not like real fond of Christians, if you're kind of like, I'm not sure I like church people, you will like Paul. He didn't either, and then he became one. It's a really amazing story. He was against him. He was putting him in jail. And then about 3 to 5 years after the resurrection, he just experienced the scandalous grace of Jesus, and he changed. He turned his life in a different direction, said, okay, I think there's something here that my life needs to be about. And he became a Jesus follower. And he's like, man, I got to make up for lost time. And so he starts planting churches all around the Mediterranean rim. And then he writes all these letters to these new Christians and these new communities where he started churches. And he writes about half of the New Testament, what has been put together as the New Testament. And he would just basically write on what it means to practically follow Jesus. And he underscores that this is a relational thing. All right? It isn't like a solo thing. I mean, it's not like, hey, I can have my faith. I don't need other people. He's like, no, this is a relational thing. Religion is done on your own. Religion is done solo. All right? Because it's all about you and all about God, and you got a piece of God. He says, no, this is a relational thing. And when you do a precursory read of all of his letters in the New Testament, you begin to see that he kind of creates this list. And we've taught on many of these things here, but he has this, what we'll call the one another list. He always talks about one another's. And this one another list is this. He says, I want you to forgive one another. I want you to accept one another. I want you to care for one another. I want you to encourage one another. I want you to submit to one another. I want you to restore one another. I want you to carry one another's burdens. He says, I want you to bear with one another. And so he's like, if you want a life that's getting the benefit of following Jesus, but also centered around the person of Jesus, this is what it looks like right here. To which some of us go, oh, I thought it just was like showing up in the seats every week. And Paul would go, no, it's way more than that. And you're like, well, I just thought if I had my Bible, like at least on my nightstand when I sleep, something would happen and it all would be good. You know, as long as I did a little praying in the morning, I was more nice than more mean. I mean, as long as I do those things, I'm going to be good. And Paul would say, no, that's not it. That's like doing the solo Christian thing. That's like you just trying to like do religion. But he said you can't do the Christian faith that way. It's kind of a big deal to me because I was raised with a version of Christianity that was kind of like a vertical morality, if you will. Like, it was kind of this vertical orientation of Christianity where we kind of measured spiritual maturity, if we could use that phrase, by like, hey, are you a better person than a worse person? Like, are you doing more good? Are you more generous? Build in a few religious practices. It's all vertical. It's all about, is God happy? As long as I behave myself, as long as, I do my daily Bible study and prayer, like God's good, right? God, we're good. It was very vertical, very vertical. I remember a very distinct moment, the very first men's group I ever got in. I was about 24 years old. I was meeting with a few guys early before work each morning, one day a week, not each morning, one day a week. And I remember one of the guys saying to me, Curt, like, how is your spiritual life going? Which was kind of daunting as a pastor because the answer should be it's really good. And I thought to myself, it is actually pretty good. I mean, I got up, I read my Bible, I did my prayer. God's happy with me. You're happy with me, right, God? I'm trying to be a better person, and so God's happy. And now, don't mind the fact that I kicked the dog on the way out the door. I was real snarky with my wife because, I was late. I yelled at somebody while I was driving to my men's group that morning. But God, you're good with me, right? Because it was just vertical. Everything was focused on as long as the vertical is good, all these people around me don't matter. And what I discovered is, okay, not that some of those things aren't good, but just believing the right thing, doing this morality thing, and as long as everything's good for me, this actually led me to kind of be really self-righteous, like really self-righteous. And let's be honest, like we've all met some self-righteous Christians, right? We've been around a few people who feel like they've got it going on, you don't. They're always looking down at you. Why are you not doing all the things? I mean, they're very vertical in their spirituality. But see, when you open the New Testament, it's nothing like that. I mean, if you have this purely vertical orientation, it's like me and God, but what I do and how I interface with others and how I influence others and the reflection of my life into other people's lives, that doesn't really matter. It just leads you to really being self-righteous. You end up having a lot of bad attitudes. It promotes legalism and racism and elitism and judgmentalism toward everybody around you. And here's one I kind of made up, like me firstism. Like the only thing that really matters is me. And again, when I look at these things, I'm like, that has nothing to do with the person of Jesus or the life where we end up going, oh my gosh, like life is so much better. Because Jesus invites us to live in such a way where people look at you and they go, oh my gosh, look at how he loves one another. Man, look at her go. Wow. Like, why wouldn't I want to be a part of whatever they've got going on in their life? And so what I want to do for the next few moments is I want us to look at something from the book of Hebrews. And the book of Hebrews, we don't really know who wrote it. Probably a guy, only because women didn't have a lot of authority back then. Thank God things have changed and evolved. And, like now there's equality in our world. Could have been a woman. Could have been, she just didn't sign it. But the book of Hebrews, it's not even really a book. It's like this long sermon. And it was geared toward Jews who had converted to Christianity. So it has a lot to do with like religious practices and how you actually connect with God. It's with all kinds of good stuff. And so it actually made it into the authorized, edition of the Bible as we have it today. And so what I want us to see is how quickly this group of people shifted from this vertical orientation to this horizontal orientation. They pivot very, very quickly. All right, and so here's what it says in Hebrews 10. And understand, right before this verse right here, they're talking about how Jesus now has come and we don't have to have a priest anymore to go on our behalf. We can actually have direct access to God through Jesus. He gives us this platform to connect with our Heavenly Father on our own. And so we pick up in verse 22 and he says, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart. And again, this is very, very vertical oriented right here. with the full assurance of what faith brings. So again, really important. I'm connecting with God. It's vertical. But then he pivots. The writer pivots. And he pivots and he says next, then let us hold unswervingly. Now, I love the word right there, unswervingly. It's just fun to say. But like, you know what swervingly is, right? Like, have you ever driven swervingly? Like where you're all over the place? Like he says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for who he promised is faithful. So all of a sudden, he's like, hey, draw near to God. You have full access to your Heavenly Father. But he's like, hey, let's take it back to planet Earth for a moment. Let's get out of the vertical reality. Let's go back to like the practical things that God called us to be and do in the world. And he gets super specific. He goes on, he says, let us consider, meaning let us discover, let us explore, let us think about all the possibilities. And you're like, okay, what do you want us to consider? Well, let us consider how we may spur, and then here's the little phrase that Paul just used all over the place in all his little letters. Let us spur one another. Let us spur one another on. This is such a fascinating phrase right here. Because what he's saying is, when you're somebody who has a relationship with God, you need to be spurring one another on. You need to be spurring people who are also running in the same direction. He's also saying, when you have people in your life that are trying to figure out what it means to know and connect with Jesus, you need to be about spurring them on. He says, I want you to stir each other up a bit. I want you to provoke each other a little bit. I want you to kind of have the access to each other's lives. So like if one friend's struggling and they're just kind of deteriorating and fading away from their faith a bit, you have access to them so you can step in and spur them on, bring them a little encouragement. He says, I want you to have the kind of access where if a marriage is struggling, that you have access to that marriage. You can come alongside and say, hey guys, you can do this. I want to spur you on. Or if you have a parent who has a son or a daughter who's just kind of drifting, and that parent doesn't really know what to do, you have enough access and trust and credibility in their lives that you can go, okay, I want to get involved with you. I want to spur you on. I mean, it's a very relational thing, but you have to be in one another's lives to be able to do this. And he's like, it's all great. I mean, the vertical's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's great. Prayer is great. Having a way to clear my conscience because I can go straight to the Father through Jesus. I mean, that's awesome. But he's like, it's not just a vertical thing. He's like, there's a horizontal piece right here that's absolutely critical to your faith because there's others that need one another's. You need one another's in your life. And of course, we go, okay, well, what's the end game on that? Like, what's the end goal? To spur one another on to what? Well, he tells us. He says, spur one another on to love others and to good deeds. Meaning this is belief in action. This is where you get on the assault bike that's sitting in the corner collecting cobwebs instead of stacking your clothes on it. This is where you get on that treadmill and instead of putting all your Amazon returns on there until you go to the UPS. I mean, he's like, you need to do something. This is where simply believing and going, okay, I need to do this isn't enough. He's like, what are you going to do about it? Because it's the doing that makes all the difference. And if you don't have someone in your life spurring you on, encouraging you, actually, when you saying, hey, how are you going to forgive? Instead of just going, gosh, man, I really should forgive. I know that's the right thing. No, how are you actually going to do it? Or, how are you going to, quit me firsting and start others firsting? Like, I mean, it's a good idea to not be selfish, but like, how are you going to do it? Who's spurring you on in that? And then the author of Hebrews, he gets all up in our business. He gets all up in your business. He gets all up in my business. And he says not, and it's like, how did he know? How did he know over 2,000 years ago? Perhaps they have the same thing going on then as we're experiencing right now. He said, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. Now, when I grew up, this meant, that basically every weekend, every Sunday, you should come to church and you should sit in the rows. You should sit in the pews. My family, when we were on vacation, we went to church. I mean, we'd be driving through Georgia to Florida, and we'd stop and we'd go to some church I didn't know about. It was dreadful. I mean, I was like, Mom and Dad, please don't make me go. It's just like, man, we cannot give up the habit of meeting together. It was good intention. Nothing wrong with that. But I just don't know that's fully what the intention of this verse is. It's kind of funny when the pandemic hit. I have a friend who always reminds me of this little Forrest Gump gif. He's like, yeah, just like that, my pastor became a televangelist. Every single one did, every single one of us, right? We all went online as we are right now. What's fascinating about this to me is, before the pandemic, it was really cool if you were online. If you had a video service, I mean, that was you've really made it if you're operating in that level. We hadn't, just so you know. I mean, this kind of got developed during the pandemic. But it's just interesting to me that now that we're kind of exiting the pandemic, that like everybody's like kind of down on the online experience. It's like, oh man, we want people in the seats. In fact, I heard a pastor once say, hey, real church, it happens in the seats within the four walls. Like, woo. If I could just be like totally irreverent for a moment, I don't think Jesus had anything like that in mind. Not that what we're doing right here isn't valuable, but I just don't think that's what he had in mind when this was being written right here. I don't think his goal was that we just only do rows. I mean, that's our Western American mindset on church. But when you look at what the writer of Hebrews says next, he kind of gives us a glimpse into what he's talking about. He's saying you need to be able to spur one another on. I don't know that that fully happens when we're just sitting in rows, shoulder to shoulder, not talking to each other. He says you got to get out of rows and into circles. This is where you spur one another on. This is where, if you're not one anothering outside of this space, listen, all you need is a little disruption in your life to take you off course. And we just had a massive disruption in our world. And I just think for many of us, you know, as I think the writer's saying, it's going to impact your faith. Your faith is going to begin to deteriorate if you don't have anything beyond just sitting right here, tuning in right here. And some of us resist this. We go, oh, no, I can solo Christian. I don't need anybody else to be a Christian. I don't need the church. I don't need other people. To which I think the author of Hebrews, I think even Jesus himself would say, I don't know that you understand what I'm about. This is a one another thing. This is a team thing. Like, you cannot do this on your own. You don't mature past the point of needing other one another's in your life. You actually mature to the point of needing more one another's in your life. And there's a bunch of others out there that need you in their life. So I want to give you a picture of what this looks like, and we're going to have a little conversation here. So let's welcome Vince Constantine back up here to the platform. Let's make some noise for Vince. I asked him to come up here and have a conversation with us. Vince.
Oops, whole thing just fell off there. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Now we are recording this, aren't we?
We are recording this.
It's okay to laugh at me.
So yeah, the beauty is we can just start right over
we
right
can
here.
start right over. Just exit that tape.
So Vince, you share from this platform, you host, and you every now and then you talk a bit about your small group experience. And it always stands out to me that you recently began connecting in the small group. I mean, this isn't something you've done your whole life. What was it for you that caused you to jump into a group for the first time?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's funny because I was thinking about this earlier today. I don't know that there was like one thing. I think it was just a series of a lot of different circumstances in my life. Just like you just got done saying, right? I kind of lived in a very solo world from a Christianity standpoint. What was interesting about that is I've always been in a team environment, whether it was work or whether it was sports or whether it was growing up. I always was in a team environment. But for some reason, I felt very like I don't need to be in a small group. I'm not a small group guy. Made every excuse in the world. Thought I was doing all the right things. And I just remember coming to Crosspoint one Sunday. Actually, it was probably one of the very first times we were here through the journey. Was we were church shopping about 10 years ago. And I just remember you saying, hey, it's not what we do in the rows, but it's life together in circles. It's what we do outside of here. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? That's probably something that I need to get more involved in. I need to get outside of my comfort zone. I need to get into a small group. And I kind of dabbled in that a little bit and thought about that. And then I was reading something one day that talked about how God, when you think about Jesus and think about his time on earth was within a small group, right? It was 12 disciples, right? Spoke to thousands of people every single day, every single week. But his real interactions, his real teachings came with those 12 guys. And I thought to myself, hey, wait a second. How can I be outside of that, right? How can I be a part of his family but not a part of his teaching, right? A part of the direction that he's going. So I always thought to myself, hey, if I really am going to do this, I really need to get out of my comfort zone and get into that small group.
So what have you experienced? I mean, you've been in faith. You're raised in a home of faith.
Yep.
But what is the group experience? How has it taken your faith to a different place?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the accountability thing you just talked about. It's interesting, right? We have these interactions with people that come in and out of our daily lives all the time. And for most of us, they're superficial, right? We don't have deep conversations, especially for guys. I mean, this is a guy thing, right? Guys are control freaks, guys. We've got it all figured out. We got it together. We have to have this outward appearance. And I just remember getting in a small group. It was actually a men's group that you hosted, and everybody was vulnerable. And I thought to myself, for the first time in my adult life, It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay not to have it all together. These guys are experiencing a lot of the same things I do. These people are experiencing a lot of the same things that I did. And I thought to myself, man, this is exactly what I needed when I needed it.
And over the last 2 years, I mean, you've been in a group through the pandemic, different group, and now it's an online group. Yeah. And talk about that a bit, because, you know, the world's changed, it's shifted, sure. and yet, how is the online experience continue to spur you on?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think we were coming into a series, and maybe we were starting a journey right around like kind of fall 2020. And it was when we were just getting really good at Zoom windows and Teams meetings and meeting over a computer. And I've been in sales for 30 plus years, and so I've always been in an interactive mode. So when we went to an online for work, I struggled. I struggled mightily because there was none of this anymore, right? It was a computer screen, and then once I figured out how to turn off the camera, I was golden, right? I was really, really good at it because I didn't have to be myself. I could be really superficial. And so everything that we did in those times professionally was just checking through an agenda, right? But there was never a deep connection. So I thought to myself, okay, the best way to do this, the safest way to do this small group is to be in an online environment. And that's what a lot of us were doing. And I thought, man, there's no way we're going to make connections. The first interaction that we had online, we had guys in our small group that were from Tennessee, from Fishers, Carmel, Indianapolis, I mean, just all over the greater community. And we came together, and in about an hour and in 15 minutes, the connections that we made, the life experiences, the things that this particular person brought up or this particular subject brought up, that all of us connected to in a different way, and the similarities we had, both relationally as well as the things we struggled with, was eye-opening to me. And for the first time, I thought, man, you can interact in this environment. And here's the cool part. It made me better at life. It made me better in the relationships that I was having to deal with professionally, as well as in a career environment, online. I was better at doing my job, better at doing life because of those interactions, because of that connection and that ability to do that even in an online environment. So, and we still have that today. We've kept the same group. Some guys have fallen off from here and there. Our small group meets early in the morning on a Thursday. We all live about a mile from each other. I mean, we could walk to Dunkin' Donuts down the street, but we don't because we find that interaction, it works, and it really is, like you and I talked about earlier today, that ability to be adaptable. This is the new environment we're in. How do I adapt to it? I can fight it. I can participate in it, right? And I chose to participate in it, and it's really taken my faith up and to the right.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing. Let's thank Vince for sharing. Thank you, Vince. Man. You know, it's really interesting because there is a relationship, as you just heard from Vince, between circles and your vibrancy of your faith. I mean, I don't know how to say it any differently. It's just, there's a direct correlation between the circles that we're in and the vibrancy of our faith. And there's really a couple of reasons that this happens. And really, we kind of already know the first one. In fact, some of you have experienced it. Some of you've kind of drifted away from faith. And if I were to bring you up here and say, hey, tell me your story, what happened over the last year, the last 2 years, you just drifted away. And isn't it true? You've kind of drifted away, and you drift. The moment you began to drift is when you drifted away from people of faith. And for whatever reason, whether it's a pandemic or, you know, we just all got isolated, or maybe you moved or had a job change, you couldn't connect with, you know, people you used to connect with, or maybe you moved to this community and you just couldn't find a church that you liked or wanted, and, you know, or maybe after the pandemic, I mean, you did good during the pandemic, but now it's like, man, life is full and it's complicated and it just seems like so much work and it's overwhelming and you've just kind of drifted away. But isn't it true? I mean, the less that we're surrounded by people of faith, the more we begin to drift. And we kind of say, well, I mean, I can read my Bible, I can watch YouTube evangelists, pastors, and you can, but the lack of connection, whether it's in a Zoom window or whether it's in person, like, you know, shoulder to shoulder, it begins to affect what we believe. This is why some of you are coming back right now. I mean, you're coming back after a long time because you slowly just felt that isolation. And possibly even started questioning, okay, do I really believe? And you're like, I don't even know logically why that happened. Well, I think the writer of Hebrews and your Heavenly Father would say, well, when you isolate yourself from community with others, not just sitting in rows. I mean, this is a part of the formula, but being in circles. When you isolate yourself from being in circles, you actually isolate yourself from experiencing the Heavenly Father. I mean, because he was really clear. I mean, he said, I can be found where two or more are gathered, he says, I'm going to be there with you. So when we don't have a circle, our faith begins to deteriorate. But see, there's another thing that begins to happen. See, when you don't have a tribe, when you don't have a circle, when you have a group of people that are just spurring you on and encouraging you to be better and get better at life, and again, this takes place over time. I mean, isn't it true that, and this isn't even true of faith people, I mean, this is true of like all people, but like the more isolated we get, the less we're interacting and hearing the stories of other people. Isn't it true the more self-centered we get? I mean, isn't it true the more self-focused and short-sighted that we get? I mean, it's kind of a long statement I'm going to put up on the screen. I want you to think about this. People who think they are better than other people usually haven't taken the time to hear the stories of the people that they think they're better than. Think about that for a moment. Every now and then, I mean, it's easy to get self-righteous, be like, well, I just don't know why those people are doing that. I don't understand. Well, perhaps we just need to stop and take a moment to understand their story. Because when you begin to understand somebody's story, you go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was your experience. It's amazing. I actually begin to see things differently after hearing from you. I mean, that's what community is. It's hearing other people's stories. In fact, next weekend, just a little insider tip. Next weekend, as we start the journey, I mean, you're going to hear the story of one of my friends from way back, and you're going to go, Curt, how in the world did you guys even get connected? I mean, and so you're going to have to, come to hear this. But the stories that you're going to hear, you begin to realize, oh my gosh, we're actually a lot closer than we ever thought we were. So back to the Hebrews writer here. Here's how he kind of wraps up. He's like, oh my gosh, some of you have stopped meeting together. All right, you stopped getting together in circles. And I'm going to tell you, this isn't going to work out well. This is not the way it was supposed to be. So he says, do not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And then here's the contrast right here. He says, instead, I want you to encourage one another, and all the more right now. I want you to be encouraging one another, meaning every single one of us, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're trying to figure out what it means to follow Jesus, he says everybody needs a circle. It's the only way you're going to get some traction and some gravity in your faith. And of course, you might say, well, what does it mean to encourage? Well, what does it mean to encourage one another? I mean, encouragement is simply just like putting courage in someone else, right? It's instilling courage. And you might go, well, why do I need that? Well, listen, like when we talk about living out our faith like that takes some courage in the marketplace. It takes some courage in the school spaces. It takes some courage to do the others first thing when I just really want to be about myself. But when I have people spurring me on, I go, all right, they're going to ask me, what are you doing to put others first? It takes courage. So if we put all these verses together, here's what the writer says. He says, let us, so he's talking to you and I, he says, let us hold unswervingly, meaning hold on tight to the hope that we profess, for who he has promised, he is faithful. In other words, God's going to do his part. He's like, okay, what's our part? What's the part you and I have to play? He says, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to consider how we can, and here's our phrase, spur one another on toward love and good deeds. I want you to be other person focused. See, God has a role, but we have a role as well. I want you to take seriously this role of spurring one another on, and don't give up the habit of meeting with one another. But I need you to encourage one another all the more as we see the end. All the more. As we kind of wrap up, here's a question I want us to think about as we head into the next 6 weeks. All right, we're heading into a new season. I mean, every time we get to this journey season, we've done this for well over a decade, and this is one of the most vibrant, growing times that you're going to experience here at Crosspoint. It's a time in just the year where we're kind of all resetting. Our kids are back in school. Summer's coming to an end. Some of us, we've had job transitions. Maybe you're new to the community, and you're connecting here, and you're new in a new community, a new church. I mean, all kinds of transitions. But this is a season that's really going to set the course for the upcoming year. And here's the question I really want you to think about. Is anyone in your life, do you have anyone outside of your family, the people you live with or roommate with, who's spurring you on to live out your faith? All right, is there anyone in your life? I mean, this is where we're here to help, man. We want to help you. We want to help you grow. Is there anyone in your life? Do you have a group of people, a circle, who are spurring you on in your faith journey? Do you have anybody in your life that's just encouraging you, that's putting courage into you outside of the people in your home? Encouraging you when you need it, and encouraging you, honestly, when you don't even know that you need it. I'm telling you, the Live Free journey is going to be amazing. I mean, the next 6 weeks are going to be absolutely amazing, but the only way to get the full experience of what I think God has some amazing, dreams for you and for me of helping set us free. All right, but the only way that's going to happen is if you will get into a circle. If you'll say, okay, I'm going to get out of rows, I'm going to get into circles, I'm going to find my tribe, I'm going to get into a Zoom window. If that's more your speed, I'm going to get shoulder to shoulder with some people in a coffee shop or in a men's group or women's group. The only way it's going to happen, the only way you're really going to experience and get the traction that helps you experience all that God has for you is if you get beyond just this space. This space is important, but you get into a shoulder-to-shoulder space. And here's the thing. I know what you're thinking in your mind. You're going, Curt, I don't have time for this. And listen, you don't. You don't. All right? That's why some of you don't exercise either, because you don't have time. Like, I don't have time. Right? Well, for those of you who do prioritize exercise, you probably gave up something to prioritize exercise. And I want you to think in your mind, if that's you, I just want you to think in your mind, add all the things you gave up. What do they add up to that you gave up? Nothing, right? You probably can't even think of what they are. I mean, maybe like an extra 15 minutes of sleep or, just scrolling through social media. I mean, what you gave up, you're like, it doesn't really add up to much of anything. See, the same is true over the next 6 weeks. If you will jump into a small group, if you'll get out of rows into circles, you're probably going to have to give some things up, but at the end, you're going to probably add those up and go, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I really missed. There's nothing I really missed, but I'm telling you, what you're going to have to show for it's going to be amazing. And you're perhaps going to fall into some of the finest people's lives you've ever met, and you're going to experience something that perhaps you've never experienced before. So here's what I want us to do. For those online, here's what I want you to do as we kind of wrap up. The band's going to start playing, and they're going to do a song for us. And this song talks about how, like, we need people in our lives. Like in those moments where things just aren't going the way we want, like, we need people to be in our court, to be alongside, to walk with us. You need one another spurring you on. And so as we sing, instead of you singing, before you check out of the window right there, I want you to scan this QR code right here, and I want you to just scan through the groups. I just want you to peruse the groups. There's online groups, there's in-person groups. I just want you to consider, is there a group that you would consider joining for the next 6 weeks? And jump in, take a look at the host, see if you know somebody, see if somebody, you might connect with. And find a Live Free group. And if you don't see any and you're like, man, I'd rather host a group. I have some friends that I think would do this with me. Man, we would love for you to do that. Just let us know that there as well. And we'll get you everything you need. And so before you tune out, I kind of am begging you. I mean, we don't twist arms on really anything here at Crosspoint, but getting into circles, we just think this is so important. Would you find a group? Would you get in a circle? And let us know on your connection card if you'd like a Live Free journal. We'll mail the field guide the journal to you this week. Just mark that on your card, and that's your homework. Before you tune out here, and you can finish that while the band plays.
I'll find a way to praise you from the bottom of my broken heart. 'Cause I think I'd rather strike a match than curse the dark. A way to thank you, but the bitterness is really hard. So I'd rather take a chance on hope than fall apart. Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to surrender to the dark. No, even if my daylight never dawns, even if my breakthrough never comes. Bring you praise. Even if my dreams fall to the ground, even if I'm lost, I know I'm bound, even if my heart will somehow say hallelujah anyway. In the hymn of triumph, in the wilderness of my lament, in the lowlands and the mountain tops, I won't forget my goodness that you have shown me, the promises that you have kept. There's better days on the horizon up ahead. Oh, even if my daylight never dawns, breakthrough never comes, even if Even if a breakthrough never comes, even if I fight to bring you praise.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. Our prayer for you is that you find your tribe this week, because when you're running with others who are running after God, you're running in the right direction. And as always, we hope you're encouraged by what you've experienced here today. Now, next time we're together, it's the Live Free journey. Be sure to check out the Live Free groups, as we believe God has some pretty amazing things in store for you over the next couple of weeks. And if you like what you've experienced today, and you'd like to donate to the online Joy Box, you can go to the Give button at the top of the screen and help fuel all the goodness that comes out of this place with a donation. Please make sure to hit send on that connection card and let us know if you'd like a Live Free journal in the mail this week. And last, if you'd like prayer today, you can text the keyword "need prayer" to this number, and a member of our prayer team will give you a call sometime today. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next time as we kick off the Live Free journey.